I want to display my custom taxonomy on the front end. Before I do that, I want to add some settings for my taxonomy. If you were to go to the Origin Edit page, you'll find a list of origins and a form for creating a new one. This form is pretty basic, but I'd like to add on to it. I want to add a URL for more information about an origin. To pull this off, we'll have to do a couple of things. The first step is to add the form fields. Inside the main plugin file, add the action hook called Add Form Fields. This is a dynamic hook. Right before the hook name, you have to append the name of the taxonomy, which is origin. This is how WordPress knows which taxonomy this hook should run under. The function I want to call will be named rOrigin_add_form_fields. Next, create a file inside the includes/admin folder named origin-fields.php. Define the function inside this file and make sure to include it from the main plugin file. I'm going to paste in some HTML into this function. Let's break this down. The HTML here is the same HTML you'll find if you were to inspect the element on the form. Nothing really special here except for two things. The first thing is the name of the input field. It should be unique. I set this to rMoreInfoURL. The next thing is the paragraph tag, which contains a short description about the input field. This is completely optional to add, but it's useful to give your users more information about this field. That's all there is to creating the input fields. You don't have to worry about adding form tags, as this will already be wrapped in one. The next step is to save the value. Back inside the main plugin file, add a new action hook called create_. This action hook is also dynamic. It is followed by the name of the taxonomy, which is origin. The function I want to call will be named rSaveOriginMeta. I'm going to create a new file inside the process folder called save-origin.php with the function defined inside. This function will be passed in the term ID. Lastly, make sure to include it from the main plugin file. Inside this function, I'm going to check if the field is set. If it isn't, then I'm just going to return the function. Just like posts, terms can have metadata. To clarify, the origin is a taxonomy, but each individual origin is called a term. This goes for any taxonomy. The individual categories or tags for a post is called a term. So you can have term metadata. The metadata API can be used for this. WordPress provides a set of functions to save term metadata which work the exact same way as the post metadata functions. The name of the functions are just different. I want you to call the update term meta function. The first parameter is the ID of the term. The second is the name, which will be MoreInfoURL, and the last parameter is the URL. I'm going to wrap the value with the function escapeURLRaw, which will make sure this is a safe URL. This will take care of creating the term. It's important to note that taxonomies will have two different forms. A form for creating the taxonomy and another for editing a taxonomy. To save some time, I'm going to go back to the main plugin file and copy this action and replace the second one from create_origin to edited_origin. The edited version will be used when a user updates the URL. The function will be the same. We're almost done. The last thing I want to do is create the form field for the edit form page. The HTML will be different, but the idea is the same. I'm going to add a new action hook called edit form fields, where the beginning of the hook is the name of the taxonomy, which will be origin. The function I want to call will be named rOrigin_edit_form_fields. I'm going to define this function inside the origin-fields file. A couple of things will be different from the new form. This function will be passed in an object called term that will contain information about the current term. To grab the metadata, I'm going to create a variable named URL, and its value will be the value returned by the function getTermMeta. The term object has a property named termID that will pass in as the first parameter. The next parameter is the name, which is more_info_URL, and the last parameter will be set to true. Now that I have my URL, I can display the form with it. I'm going to paste in some HTML, which is a tad different than the function above. I know it seems weird, but the HTML tends to be different for both fields. The Edit Form field uses tables to format the form. What's most important is the Input field. For the value, I'm echoing out the URL. This will take care of the form and saving the data. I'm going to test this. Refresh the page and you should see the field appearing. I want you to create a new origin. You can paste in any URL you want. I'm just going to paste in a URL to the France Wikipedia page. You'll now see the term appear to the right. Click on it and check to see if the edit form is working as well. You don't have to change any values, but if you press Update, then you should still see everything intact. The next step is to make the origin appear on the front end along with the more info URL. Open the filter content file. This is the file that contains the function to modify the output onto the front end. I'm also going to open the template for this. I'm going to make one modification to the template. I want you to add another list item that has 3 placeholders for the name, the actual value itself, and then a placeholder for the more info URL. Inside the filter function, we will replace the text holder with origin. For the actual value itself, we're only interested in the first origin itself. I'm going to create a variable named origin which will contain the value returned by the function wp_getPostTerms. This function will get all the terms associated with this post. The first parameter is the ID of the post. The second parameter is the taxonomy, which is origin. This function will return an array of terms. I'm going to create another variable named more_info_URL. I'm going to use the ternary operator to assign the value for this variable. I'm going to check if the first item in the origin array is set, so we know we have at least one item in the origin array. If there is a value, I'm going to get the more_info_URL metadata using the getTermMeta function. Otherwise, I'm going to set this as an empty string. Now that we have our values prepared, let's display them. For the origin itself, I'm going to use the ternary operator again. If the first item in the array is set, I'm going to output the name of that term. Each item in the array is an object. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to the function wp_getPostTerms. If you scroll down to the return values section, you'll find the properties for each object in the array. One of these is the name, which is what we're using here. However, if the first term is indeed empty, we're going to use the phrase none. The very last step to all of this is to display the more info URL. I'm going to use a conditional statement to check if the more info URL variable is empty. If it isn't, I'm going to replace the placeholder with a clickable link. Otherwise, I'm just going to replace it with an empty string. Let's test this out now. I want you to view a recipe without making any changes to it. You should see the origin list item with none next to it and no URL appearing. After you've confirmed that, you can now edit this recipe. I want you to assign the origin we created earlier. Save your changes and view the recipe again. You should now see the origin appear along with the more info URL. That wraps it up for this lecture. We've learned how to make taxonomies and settings for our taxonomies.